Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. In our meeting with the DEC, there were so many interesting facts brought out. And I'm going to give you in this report just some of the facts that again, I found fascinating. And these facts are coming from studies both on our side, they're coming from creel studies, they're coming from the netting that the DEC does every year and the Canadian government does as well to figure out how many bass they catch in these nets. And then they compare it with the years before. All these things come into play. So let me give you some interesting facts that came from this. Number one, the one thing we really celebrate, the one thing we tout and we go out there and promote is that if a fisherman from another state comes to the St. Lawrence River, they're going to get a chance to catch a smallmouth bass of a lifetime, bass that have grown to 5 pounds and over. Well, did you ever wonder how long it takes a bass in the St. Lawrence River to come from birth to go to 5 pounds? How long would it take? You know, down south, it only takes a couple years. But they've found that up here where the climate is so much colder, the water temperature therefore is colder, and all fish are cold-blooded beings, that they're much less active in the winter, they don't grow as much, and so forth. The findings that these studies have done now has come to the point that we realize that a 5-pound bass in the St. Lawrence River is going to be between 15 and 20 years old. That's how long it takes for us to raise a 5-pound bass that we can bring people from all over the world to try to catch. That's kind of staggering. It's just amazing to me. Do you know that it takes 3 to 4 years for a bass to become sexually mature, where they can spawn and new bass can be born? So 3 to 4 years. It takes that long for a bass in the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, to grow to be legal size, which is 12 inches. That's the size they have to be for you to catch and keep. So that's a 3 or 4 year program right there. The other thing that I find is absolutely fascinating is that they've studied these bass with cameras now. You know, our technology enables us to see so much that we never could see before. And so they've watched what happens when a lure goes down, a bass is on the bed, it takes that lure, is brought up to the surface, the hook is taken out, and it's released. And what they found, they being the people studying the pictures, these biologists, they found that it only takes about 30 seconds from the bass taken off the bed to have the gobies and the panfish move in to decimate that bed and the whole thing be over. The other thing that they found, you know, when people are fishing tournaments, they were allowed to have 5 bass in our live well. That's our daily limit. That's the number of bass we can have. But what fishermen do a lot of times is they cull the fish as they fish longer. As they're fishing, they have 5 bass, but it's not time to go in yet, so all of a sudden they catch a bigger bass. And so they take that bigger bass and replace one of the smaller bass from the live well, and they throw that back. But how long has that fish been in the live well? It only takes about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, and I may be a little bit wrong with these times, but the important thing is to realize that these culled bass, even though they may live and go back and whatever, their spawning time is over too, because they have been off the bed. They're the guardians of the bed. We don't want to take them off there. So I think this is a really fascinating fact. And the other thing that I'll talk about in another report is the fact that largemouth and smallmouth bass are not only are they not the same, their habits are so different that smallmouth are much more exposed to dangers in this period of time than largemouth, because smallmouth spawn over hard surfaces, and largemouth spawn over softer bottoms. And those softer bottoms, the gobies don't live in those places. The largemouth are back in the bays and in the reeds and in the weedy areas and in the soft mucky areas. This is where they spawn, and they're not under near the danger that spawning period will be interrupted by threats such as gobies and panfish. So the largemouth are in much better shape. In fact, it seems like the numbers are really increasing in the river than the smallmouth. Now, one of the other things, the facts that I think were really important, in their netting studies, because they've done this every year for decades, they put nets out and they figure out how many bass are in that netting period, that they put the nets in the same place, in the same size nets and so forth. They have found that there's a pretty stable sort of setting of the same number of bass taken each year. So that the numbers aren't going down. Now, there's periods over decades where there's been ups and downs based on other things. But the fact that the numbers of bass that they're taking in these nets in the same period this year, as opposed to last year, as opposed to the year before, are pretty similar. So it means that it doesn't appear like there's a big drop in the number of smallmouths due to all the different things that we think threaten them, that we believe threaten them, from cormorants to the VHS virus to gobies to the fact that we're in the very tip, the northern range of smallmouth bass, very much farther north, and they don't survive. And so we know that they're under more pressure in this area. So these are all the reasons that we've had the regulations and the seasons and the laws that we've had. Will that change? We only are at the beginning of this process, but I'll tell you more in the next report. Until then, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.